Russia did not want to resume the energy truce and has already paid the price for it. Ukraine today set another record for the range of strikes deep into Russia. It is reported that on February 12, Ukrainian drones struck the Lukoil oil refinery in the city of Ukhta, Komi Republic, which is 2,000 kilometers from Kyiv. And I should note that this is already the second attack on this particular refinery, which plays a crucial role in supplying fuel to the northern regions of Russia. In addition, the Volgograd Neftepera-Rabotka oil refinery has completely stopped its operations due to a fire caused by a drone attack. So, is this another refinery that came under attack? At the same time, United States and European efforts to limit Russia's ability to sell its oil are forcing it to offer even bigger discounts to those willing to buy it. But even though these discounts have already exceeded $27 per barrel, huge volumes of crude still can't find a buyer. It turned out that half of the extracted oil is now stuck on tankers in the open sea because there are simply no buyers for it. And this already raises the question of how reasonable it is for Russia to continue producing the same volumes of oil as it does today. And now the Kremlin has already come up with a way to fix this whole situation. The Kremlin is preparing a solution to reduce the budget deficit of the Russian Federation, which has faced a collapse in oil and gas revenues. So in Moscow, they plan to further increase taxes for Russians in order to collect an additional 1.2 trillion rubles. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave any comment under this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There, we publish breaking news as it comes in. So today, February 12th, it came as a surprise to Russians that the end of the energy truce works both ways. Let me remind you, the United States of America suggested to Russia to resume this marathon of strikes on energy facilities, saying that if Russia doesn't hit Ukrainian energy infrastructure, Ukraine won't hit Russian energy infrastructure either. But the Kremlin rejected this idea. Well, if Russia strikes Ukrainian energy infrastructure, then as expected, Ukraine has also resumed strikes on the Russian oil sector. On February 12, Ukrainian drones struck the Lukoil oil refinery in the city of Ukhta, Komi Republic, which is proven to be 2,000 kilometers from Kyiv. This is already the second attack on this refinery, which plays a crucial role in supplying fuel to the northern regions of Russia. And it's interesting that now footage is already appearing showing that in the northern regions, gas stations have started taking down fuel prices and closing these stations even though they still have gasoline left. This suggests they likely know there's a problem and may sell it for a higher price later.
There, another one is flying toward the refinery. Fuck.
A fire broke out at the facility in Ukhta as a result of a drone attack. And here is footage from the scene showing that something is burning very intensely. You can see a huge column of black smoke above the plant in the footage. It is reported that the attack was carried out by strike drones of the Lyuty type. According to local residents, at least 3 such drones fell on the Ukhta oil refinery. Lyuty is a well-known Ukrainian development. It is reported that the atmospheric vacuum oil distillation unit was hit. This unit was modernized in 2012, increasing its capacity to 2 million tons of raw materials per year. Damage to this unit could disrupt the production of heavy oil products and road bitumen, as well as further chains of deeper processing. The total capacity of the refinery in Ukhta is estimated at 4 to 6 million tons of oil per year, and now Ukrainian drones have reached it as well. It is reported that during the raid, the regional authorities evacuated the plant's employees and the local shopping center. Rosaviatsia reported the closure of Ukhta airport to ensure flight safety. Local social media groups also report that some educational institutions and organizations in the city are being evacuated. The head of Ukhta, Marina Metaleva, urged residents not to panic. She said, well, so what if some drones flew in? But now, Russians who are 2,000 kilometers away from Ukraine are suddenly asking on social media what's going on. The war, it seems, has now reached them even 2,000 kilometers away. They were hoping it would never affect them. Well, according to open sources, Lukoil Ukhta oil refinery is the oldest oil processing plant in the northwestern federal district. Among other things, it produces gasoline and diesel fuel. Earlier, the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense emphasized that this plant supplied fuel to the Russian army and therefore is a legitimate military target. But that's not all. Another Lukoil oil refinery was also hit, Lukoil Volgograd oil refinery in the Krasnoarmysky district of Volgograd. This is the largest oil refinery in the Volgograd region and one of the key assets of Lukoil, which, I remind you, came under United States sanctions last fall. The plant processes more than 15 million tons of oil per year. And it is reported that the Volgograd oil refinery has completely shut down due to a fire caused by a drone attack because of the drone strike. The damage was sustained in particular by the same primary oil processing unit AVT, one with a capacity of 18,500 tons per day, which is 40% of the entire refinery's capacity. And while Ukrainian drones are destroying oil refineries in Russia, United States and European sanctions are also doing their part. As the Wall Street Journal writes, United States and European efforts to limit Russia's ability to sell its oil are forcing it to offer even bigger discounts to those willing to buy it. But even though these discounts have already exceeded $27 per barrel, huge volumes of Russian oil still can't find buyers. At the moment, about 143 million barrels of Russian oil are on tankers in open sea, which is roughly half of the Russian Federation's monthly production. As a result, most of the tankers that have turned into floating storage are currently cruising near ports close to the Russian, Indian, and Chinese coasts, or in areas used for ship-to-ship oil transfers. For example, near Malaysia. But there are still no buyers for this oil. As experts say, the time frame for selling these barrels will largely depend on the level of discounts offered to potential buyers for Russian Urals oil at the loading ports. These discounts have reached a record $27.30 per barrel compared to the Brent benchmark. But even such a record discount still doesn't satisfy buyers. Even China says we'll probably wait a bit longer until the discounts get bigger. And here I should remind you that in January, the European Union's ban on importing fuel made from Russian oil came into effect. And this creates a domino effect, a kind of double blow that undermines the sales not only of raw materials, but also of the petroleum products made from them. Let me explain here. The point is that India has been involved throughout Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. It bought cheap Russian oil, actively processed it into petroleum products, gasoline, diesel, bitumen, and so on, and then sold these petroleum products to Europe. But now this loophole is closed. Europe has said that if it is found that these petroleum products are made from Russian oil, it is completely forbidden to import them into Europe. And now it is reported that the oil and gas revenues of the Russian Federation's budget fell in January to their lowest level since the start of the COVID pandemic. And it's important to note that the Kremlin is clearly concerned about the worsening budget situation, which has also coincided with the end of economic growth in Russia. Even though war expenses are not decreasing, Putin must and is ready to continue fighting. But the Kremlin has already come up with where to get the money. They say, well, there's no oil and gas revenue, but we need to spend on the war, so where do we get the money? To reduce the budget deficit, which has faced a collapse in oil and gas revenues, taxes can be increased by an additional 1.2 trillion rubles. At Sberbank of the Russian Federation, they suggested that additional money for the war against Ukraine could, for example, be collected from producers of precious and non-ferrous metals, since their prices have risen significantly. The logic here is simple. Just look at the quotes. You'll see that the prices of gold, silver, platinum, and so on have gone up. Have jumped. So let's just raise taxes on all these metals. As a result, the Kremlin decided that for precious metal producers, they could simply raise the mining tax and collect these 1.2 trillion rubles from them. And if that's not enough, the Kremlin is considering raising taxes for ordinary Russians once again. What's wrong with that? Well, since the war is, as Russians say, a people's war, then let the people pay for this war out of their own pockets. That's the logic in the Kremlin. And finally, I'll add that, according to Reuters, classified calculations for the Russian government have revealed a grim picture of a 10 trillion ruble budget deficit. And for the first time in many years, there is a fake increase in the nominal budget revenues, even despite the increase in value-added tax and taxes on small businesses. Even that didn't help, and the budget revenues have become significantly less than the expenses, which means there's already a huge budget deficit. And so, in order to save the budget, which this year again has to spend every third ruble on the army and the war, the Russian Ministry of Finance has already proposed to legalize casinos and take 30% of all their revenue, to introduce export duties on diamonds, and the Ministry of Natural Resources has announced a radical increase in environmental fees. Moreover, for metallurgists this rate was increased 20 times and for gold miners 25 times. They decided that they should pay much more. They also promised to introduce a 22% tax on goods that Russians buy on marketplaces. So, when a Russian buys something online, even if value-added tax is already included, it doesn't matter. They want the Russian to pay another 22% tax. By the way, write in the comments which marketplaces exist in Russia at all. In Europe, there's OLX, in the States, there's eBay, but what about Russia? Is there anything left there that's similar to civilized marketplaces? That's why there's a huge problem with income for the Russian budget. But, as they say, Putin isn't discouraged and says, it's no big deal, we'll just shake down these Russians again, squeeze some more money out of them, and keep on fighting. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. Also, if you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation or by subscribing as a paid or sponsoring member. You can find the links and payment details in the description of this video. There are a variety of platforms there, and I'm sure you'll be able to choose the one that suits you best. I would be grateful for any support you can give. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.